Hello everybody, Tracy Sizemore here. We're at day 7 of RPGaDay, and I'm still going. So, the question for the day is, what was your most impactful RPG session? And I have a problem because I have a couple of impactful sessions, and I have more all the time. So, it'll be hard for me to decide which is the most impactful, so I'm just going to sort of overview a few of them. One that immediately came to mind, and maybe this is the most impactful, is my friend Daryl Hayhurst ran a quick game. I think it was either 1 or 2 sessions of Dragon Kings, and Dragon Kings is a setting, sort of a I don't know, post-apocalyptical kind of dystopian kind of not a pleasant place, and it kickstarted a little while back. I think there's a rule book, and it's based on Savage Worlds, but anyway, we created characters, and the basic premise of setting up the moment that I'm about to talk about was that we are, or were, in some way in a town where there's a shortage of resources. You know, the whole world is short resources, and one of the most precious resources is water. And we were characters who were living in this town who ended up being taken over by a more powerful military. And so the beginning of the game was this moment where we were forced to, you know, our lives had changed all of a sudden, because we were now under the thumb of a military commander and their soldiers, and so they were recruiting for people to do something, guard the well, or not. No, it was something, and I'm not really helping here. The point of the moment that I'm talking about is the dynamic between the player characters and these soldiers. And so at one point we were lined up, being not recruited so much as conscripted to do something for this military commander. And we were forced to, I mean, they were not giving us a choice. We were forced to submit to their will. And of course, we actually did have a choice. We could try to fight back, even though there was a commander here and soldiers around him, and we were outnumbered and all that stuff. And my character, I believe, was joking around or being going against the grain, you know, being defiant. And my reward for defiance, my character's reward, was to just get full on, you know, smacked, punched by the commander. And it was played in such a way that, you know, Daryl, as the GM, he's like, he full on punches you. I mean, he beats you, and in an attempt to make you submit. And it was a powerful moment, because it was one of those things. It's like, well, as a player, I sit there and go, well, I could fight back, but that might mean my death. And, you know, as a character, that kind of went through my mind as well. And, but I was so defiant, so, like, you know, that the emotions, the anger, the oh, I'm gonna kill this guy, was rising up in me really powerfully. And yet I felt powerless, because if I did it, I was likely to get killed. That's at least how my character felt. And, you know, ideally I could have defied him. I could have attacked him. And with the hope that my fellow characters, PCs, had my back. And they probably would have. And we may have survived. We may not have. We may have paid the price for that defiance. But, and the way Daryl's games are, is he doesn't know what's going to happen. He's set up a situation that's very disadvantageous for the players, and yet he's not under any kind of predetermined ideal that this or this is going to happen. So he was open to the idea of us attacking that guy. But he'd set up the situation so well that those feelings of helplessness, anger, fury, and yet I felt like I had to keep my mouth shut. That's what the character felt. In order to save their own skin, the character kept their mouth shut. So that was a very impactful role-playing moment for me. And I remember it. You know, those kinds of moments, they're rare, and they can be painful. It can be unpleasant. And yet, after the fact, I don't know, it can be very, like, insightful. So, that's one moment. I probably didn't describe it well, but the point of it is that feeling of somebody else's power over you. And to transition from that to something completely similar is my experience with Velvet Glove, which I think I'd mentioned before. Velvet Glove, again, is that 70s girl gangs game where these teenage girls have ganged together to protect each other's backs, to watch each other, to fight off this world that is sort of arrayed against them in terms of misogyny and inequality, both for women and for minorities in terms of race and all that stuff. It's all built into Velvet Glove, and it's really well done. But it's the same kind of thing. For me, it was a less well, I don't know, not painful. A less. It was more empathy, more emotion, and less anger. I'd never really. That was a whole session. That was with Brendan Conway at Origins, and it was a whole session of deeply empathizing with the character I'm playing. And it was really the first and most impactful experience I've had with a moment where I've empathized and felt inside a little bit of what the PC might feel in that kind of situation. I don't know. A sort of railing against the status quo, a sort of, helplessness, and yet a sort of defiance. It's a beautiful thing. I don't know. It was a beautiful experience, and I can't hope to know what it's like to experience that. And there's sort of personal things that come up about that because of my status as a sort of transgender person. But I loved that session, and I loved that game, and what the players and GM brought to it. So um, very impactful for me personally, uh, because of all the sort of, I want to say baggage, but not baggage. It's all the struggles that I bring to it as well. Um, Other moments that I've had very impactful have been as a GM. Um, when my players engage with those little things, those little hooks that I put into my games that are not necessarily important to the story, but offer a human connection in some way. So, for example, I have a sci-fi game that I run sometimes. It's called the Han Cluster, the Rassiter Calamity, and that is my own sci-fi world where the PCs are a crew of a trading ship in interstellar space in a place called the Han Cluster, a cluster of stars that have a bunch of habitable planets in close proximity relatively, and they get a distress call from a big trading ship that's really in trouble. It's been sort of specifically targeted by pirates. And it turns out that most of their command crew has been killed, and that a second or a lieutenant who barely has command training. I mean, she has command training, but has never really had a whole lot of practical experience doing it, is suddenly thrust into the captain's role. And so the PCs are sort of tasked with helping this ship repair themselves or figure out a way to fight back the impending return of pirates who are really trying to get at this ship because it's a very sort of famous trading ship. And so that new captain has the capabilities and has the instinct for leadership, absolutely. Doesn't have the experience, and so the PCs do, and so they help this ship and this new captain get through this really very critical crisis with thousands of people on board this ship, both the crew and civilians. And among those civilians are some kids. And so there's little things that I do where I'll bring, when the PCs first arrive, I bring out this little girl. Her name is Catherine. And she can't find her dad after the initial pirates attack. So she comes up to one of the PCs and asks, can you help me find my daddy? And that's all I start with, right? I can't find my daddy. Some players might just sort of shuffle Catherine off to the captain of the ship or one of the crew or whatever, and that's totally cool. Totally cool. Some players will engage with Catherine, and I've had moments where my favorite moment of this is when one of my players, and it turned out to be Rotten Blessing, engaged with Catherine in such a way that he gave her tasks to do, and she wanted to help, and so she was super enthusiastic. So he gave her some sort of non-important but tasks to do on the ship during the adventure, like keep up morale in the kitchen or whatever, and Catherine took it all seriously, and by the end of the adventure, not only was she by the end legitimately helping with morale, because this adventure sort of comes to a peak where pirates are attacking. They're almost got the hyperdrive fixed, and there's this big, if it depends on the game, but in this particular case, pirates are bearing down on this ship. The crew has almost got it fixed, and they're fighting people off to gain themselves time. They're doing all that they have to do in various different theaters of the situation. And in and among those is little Catherine, who's, helping in any way she can and taking her job as a new crew, as a sort of helper seriously. And so she like helps, organize the other kids on the ship, and she gets on the comms at one point and gives her little speech and stuff like that. And by the end of the adventure, that new captain, who now by the end is, and she's also very engageable, by the end that new captain who was thrust into the role has grown into the role thanks to the help of the PCs, if they engage with her, which is really great. And she gives little Catherine like a insignia to make her sort of an honorary part of the crew. And to me, it's a gift that my players gave me that day. And I get to play little Catherine. So, I don't know, it meant a lot to me. And I think, judging my reaction, I suppose that was one of my most impactful sessions. And it doesn't matter, it's not important to the story. But it's one of those things that really sticks with me. And at the time, I'm running the game, so I'm not quite as emotional as I am about it now. I still get emotional about it during the game, and that particular game, it's not uncommon for me to start choking up at the end, depending on how it goes, because the PCs really came through for all these people. They turn into heroes, and that really means a lot to me. I don't know, as a storyteller, and to be able to express that kind of a collective, here we are all together trying to do something important. So that's the kind of sensibility that guides me when I write a new adventure. So anyway, I've had others, but I'll leave it at that because that obviously has hit me pretty hard. So anyway, those are some of my most impactful RPG sessions. And I think there are other questions later in RPGaDay that will let me elaborate on some of these other things about why I play RPGs and what I hope to get out of them. So I look forward to those questions. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow.